Next is the Canadian Constitution Foundation.
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. So my name is Janani Shanmuganathan, and I'm here for the Canadian Constitution Foundation, and my questions are for Deputy Minister Stewart. So, sir, in your interview summary, you explained that in Ottawa, municipal and provincial authorities were not used more extensively because the OPS was overwhelmed by protesters. Do you recall saying that?
I do.
And I take it what you mean by that is that authorities like the Highway Traffic Act, noise bylaws were not being enforced by the OPS because they were overwhelmed by protesters.
That's correct.
So there was this resource issue in Ottawa, not enough police officers on the ground to enforce the law.
That's correct.
So I'd like to take you to your interview summary. And Mr. Clerk, this is WTS 6066. And it's page 12, please. So if we look at the third paragraph under the Ottawa Police Service heading, what it says here, it says, the DM, that's you, sir, also described how there was some tension between the City of Ottawa and the federal government because Chief Slowly wanted more assistance and questions were raised about how many RCMP officers and resources had been deployed to assist the OPS rather than to protect federal assets. So what you're describing here is that there's this tension because Chief Slowly wants more help to address the resource issue and is asking, well, how many of these RCMP officers are really just being used to protect federal assets rather than helping us, the OPS, enforce things like the Criminal Code and the Highway Traffic Act to deal with the protests. Is that fair?
That is fair.
And the tension is that OPS wants more help and is questioning, well, how much help are we actually getting, right?
Right.
And you go on to say in that paragraph, the RCMP's position was that the OPS should have asked the OPP for more resources and that it was the OPP's responsibility to come and serve. He, that's you, sir, explained that the RCMP felt pressed by the OPS, but that the OPP was the force that the OPS should look to pursuant to legislation. And then there's a reference to the Ontario Police Services Act. So there's this tension, and the RCMP is feeling pressed, and the response you're hearing coming from the RCMP is that the OPS should really go to the OPP, right?
Correct.
The response isn't, hey,
not exclusively, though. To be clear, not exclusively. The RCMP had agreed to come with resources that they had to hand to help. And there was some confusion around how they were counting heads and whether those people were at the disposition of the OPS or whether they were under RCMP control and potentially deployable. So there was some confusion about that. But at all times, there was an expectation that the OPP would come as well.
Yes, right. The RCMP position was, well, OPS should go to the OPP first and then come to us. Is that fair?
That is the RCMP's position as I understand it.
And so the position, the response that you were getting from the RCMP wasn't, well, the OPS is asking us for help. We should do everything we can do to give them whatever they need as soon as possible. That wasn't the position you were hearing?
Not to that extent. No, the RCMP's position was that they could provide some help, but to the extent that more help was required, the Ottawa Police should be asking the OPP.
Right. And so, maybe it's just me, but it kind of sounds to me like there's one level of government saying, passing the buck and saying you should look to another level of government. But I take it you don't agree with that?
I don't agree with that.
Now, this idea that the OPP was the force that the OPS should be looking to pursuant to legislation, Commission counsel asked you about that in her examination, and she suggested that it was the Police Services Act, and you said, I believe so, right?
I did.
So there's this idea that's going around that there is something in the Police Services Act that means the OPS should be going to the OPP primarily or first before it goes to the RCMP.
That is my understanding.
All right, so I've taken a look at the Police Services Act, and I think we should bring it up. Mr. Clerk, that's CCF 6011. And to page 15, please. And so if we could just pause here for a moment. So Section 9 of the Police Services Act, Section 9.1 talks about, when a police service is absent or inadequate, OPP assistance may be sought. So what 9.1 says is if the commission finds that a municipality to which subsection 4.1 applies is not providing police services, it may request that the commissioner have the Ontario Provincial Police give assistance. So what it says is that it may request that the commissioner have the Ontario Provincial Police give assistance. And now if we scroll down to subsection 6, what it says here is a municipal chief of police who is of the opinion that an emergency exists in the municipality may request that the commissioner have the Ontario Provincial Police give assistance. So what I say is, these sections enable the OPS to go to the OPP, but I don't see anything in the Act that says the OPS cannot go to the RCMP first, or that the OPS can only go to the RCMP after they've gone to the OPP. Do you have a different understanding of this legislation?
This is the first time I've seen the legislation, so I was operating on the basis of what I understood the case to be. But I think I would not agree with the way you put it. As I understood it, in the circumstances we faced, the RCMP was willing to help and did not stand on principle as to whether they were the first or the second asked. They felt the OPP was what the Ottawa Police Service should be asking. So,
okay,
but they
sure.
were not holding off and responding because the OPS hadn't asked the OPP.
Fair enough, but you do agree that it was your understanding that it was the RCMP's position that the appropriate force to be seeking assistance from was the OPP. Is that fair?
Technically, yes.
Okay, technically that was what the RCMP's position was. Well, not technically, that was the RCMP's position.
Well, I understood it to be, and you've just obviously improved my understanding, that was what the law required. The circumstances drove a different set of considerations.
Okay, fair enough. And now you're not aware of any other law or legislation that requires the OPS to go to the OPP for help first before seeking help from the RCMP?
I am not.
Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next.